Hello, and welcome to the Modern Dog Trainer podcast, hosted by myself, Ines McNeil, founder of themoderndogtrainer.net, where you'll find articles, downloads, courses, and coaching on the best practices for modern pet businesses. Be sure to add this podcast to your favorite listening list on Spotify or iTunes, and join our free discussion group on Facebook called Business Support by the Modern Dog Trainer. Welcome to the Modern Dog Trainer podcast. I'm super excited to have you here today. For those of you that aren't aware yet, I have Dr. Susan Friedman here for a podcast interview and discussion with me, and I'm super thrilled about it. So thank you for saying yes to this and hopping on. I would love for you to give us an introduction about yourself before we dive into anything. I feel like you would probably do it more justice than I could. So.
Oh, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. I'm always so happy to be able to talk to people and hopefully disseminate a more empowering view of behavior change science, which has a lot of bad reputation over the many decades. I think it's poorly understood. Although if there's ever a user group who understands it, it would be the trainers. So hopefully I can contribute to their thinking. I really need to sit down and write out a pithy, short background. I always ramble. Let's see how I do. My background, career-wise, started working with special ed kids who were so violently and misbehaved in the inner cities where they came from that they were actually sent to New Hampshire, where I was living. So it was a lot of Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New York kids being sent to a residential treatment center in New Hampshire. And I'm so thankful for that experience because I describe them as really the extreme behaviors on the planet, teen boys who had ill-fit environments really is that set up this behavior. While I was there, I got to meet the behavior analysts. The person who ran the program was one of Skinner's students, Wells Hively, so he's well in his 80s now.
Wow.
And Skinner and Ogden Lindsley, two notables in behavior analysis, were on our board of directors. So I got to have dinner with them and hang out for a few days with those brilliant minds. So between the kids really being sort of the stress test of our principles and our practices, and these extraordinary mentors, I was launched into the world of behavior environment relations, the level of analysis that is how the environment moves behavior. And then from there, I became a professor for several years in Colorado and Utah after getting my graduate degree. And then our family moved to Africa, Southern Africa, a country called Lesotho, for 5 years, and I was able to open an American school there, which was another huge learning experience about behavior and multicultural issues and needs. And it was always great to start the day with 14 different national anthems, and
Wow.
So there was a lot of learning there. When we came back to Utah here. And I decided after 15 years working at the university here that I wanted a change and started writing in popular magazines about companion parrot behavior because I'd gotten a parrot and all the lay literature was very punishment oriented, which surprised me. They were very much a reflection of conventional wisdom, or what I've come to call cultural fog. And so I started writing little bits here and there, never thinking that it would turn into another career. But here I am 20 years later, and I have Behavior Works, a consulting business. And I work all around the world giving seminars about the fundamental principles and how to apply them, and about ethical behavior change, and working at conferences and zoos around the world. So how was that for?
That's wonderful. No, I think that gives you or gives us a lot of context as to, how you came about and why you've been so influential in the community. I personally took your course. It's called Living and Learning with Animals: The Fundamental Principles and Procedures of Teaching and Learning, several years ago at this point. It still to this day is, I believe, probably the only course out there that I would recommend as like a must take for new trainers, right?
Thank you. It's
Yeah.
such a big reinforcer to hear that. We
Yeah.
love our course.
Yeah.
The co-instructors who do the homework reviews love the course, and our students love the course. So
Yeah.
it's really a love fest, that one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I took it around the same time, either before or during the same time I was in a college psych class and actually got to go to an ABA facility for children where
Oh,
the
wow.
professor
That's great.
was working. And so to see that really applied obviously with animals with your course, but then also with human children was just
That's right.
fascinating. Yeah.
I often say we culturally spend so much time fascinated with the concept, the metaphor of Noah's
Hmm.
Ark, and all the species two by two and how different they are. We spend a lot of time focused on how amazingly different the species are on this planet. And it is amazing.
Hmm.
But also amazing, at least as amazing, is how similar we all are.
Yeah.
And learning how we learn is the flagship similarity. I am friends with many veterinarians actually take the class, and I've learned from and I work with when we work with zoo animals in particular. And I remember one of them saying to me that if you gave him a piece of a liver, an animal's liver, and he looked under a microscope, he would not be able to tell you what species of animal it was because all livers look the same.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, who knew?
Yeah.
So it's not just the way we learn that's in common among all of us on this planet, but also certain organs. And, there's a lot of similarities that I think if we focused on, we would get further respecting one another. We wouldn't seem as
Yeah.
different as we do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it was definitely a transformational course and helped me along my journey of becoming the best dog trainer it could be. And
Wonderful.
yeah, it inspired me obviously to also look at working with other species. Since then I've actually volunteered at a bird sanctuary for a few months, and then also took a horse training seminar. And so just seeing all of that applied to so many different species was really eye-opening, and
Good for
that all
you,
just
too.
gives you a much deeper understanding of how your work impacts the dogs, obviously, that you work with, and the people as well, right?
That's right. So any animal trainer is
Yeah.
ultimately a trainer of Homo sapiens for sure.
Yes. Yes.
That's really true. And developing your style of teaching,
Hmm.
there's so many ways that we can sing the same song but have different voices as we do it.
Yes.
And I'm sure you saw that in the course when you moved from one co-instructor to the other,
Yeah.
that we don't all teach it the same. We don't all require the same answer exactly. There's sort of a bandwidth of similarity, but then there's room for a lot of individuality about how you best deliver this information and have that impact. Well, I'm really impressed that you took that ball of cross species applicability and ran with it,
Oh, yeah.
because I think the more species you work with, the better you get at seeing
Hmm.
how these principles are really held in common, and
Yes.
then also how to custom fit them. But we're custom fitting them less about the species, I think, and more about the individual
Yeah.
within that species, right?
Yeah.
So it's less about canids and more about, Spot in
Yeah.
his home with those particular caregivers. So,
Exactly.
yeah. Oh, that's
Exactly.
great.
Um, what is your favorite part of your work these days?
Oh, that's these days of COVID days, really.
Right?
We've been in the COVID contingencies on our behavior for so long now. It's really surprising how well we're all doing,
Hmm.
actually, being so restricted when freedom of movement is such an important and big thing in our culture. Um, well, I've been really happy that my work hasn't slowed down very much because I was already set up to do online work because of the
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And I just needed a little bit of overhead, like a better microphone. And so I've been continuing to teach webinars and to have conversations with people who are doing so much to disseminate this information.
Mm.
And I guess my favorite part, I would say, is that I'm still doing the zoo work, the zoo coaching of the keepers and trainers
Awesome.
through Zoom. So I have this wonderful setup where if they have iPhone cameras, then they're able to set it up for a long shot for me to see the training and for a close-up shot. So, for example, the other day we were working on teaching giraffes to present their hoof for trimming voluntarily. And that's in preparation of a presentation I'll do on zoo consulting for Clicker Expo in January.
Nice.
And so we had 3 people holding cameras. We had the giraffe, and we had the cameras on, they're called gimbals. I don't know if you know them. I have a journalist daughter, so she said, Mom, you need gimbals. They're these sticks that are kind of like gyroscopes. They keep the camera steady, the iPhone camera
Wow.
steady,
Oh, nice.
and zoom. So I had a long shot in one of the Brady Bunch squares, and I had the hoof right up close to see what the person working on the hoof was doing, and then I had a really long view of the barn. So and 2 speakers. So that I think is
Nice.
my favorite part. And then we took it over to penguins, and I was able to start working on how we'd set up the environment for the penguins to get on a scale for voluntary weights.
Wow.
Of course, it's hard to get one penguin to do anything without 20 penguins following. So that'll be the training challenge there.
I love it.
Um, but maybe that's my favorite part is the zoo work through Zoom, that with a little bit of creativity and a little bit of overhead,
Hmm.
we're able to continue, my role as a consultant out there, even though I'm cozy at home.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's so awesome. Um, so switching back to dog trainers and applied animal. Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the ABA. What the hell
Yeah.
is it?
Well, it's
Applied
two
behavior
A's.
analysis.
Yeah, applied animal
Yes.
behavior analysis or
Yes.
animal applied behavior analysis. It does
There we
get
go.
confusing.
Why is an understanding of that so important for dog trainers in the industry, do you think?
Yeah, it's a question I've thought a lot about actually because I work with some trainers who are really excellent in terms of their technique
Mm-hmm.
and their ethics. They're really least intrusive training strategies who know very little about the science under the hood, about the description of how these principles are being applied.
Mm-hmm.
And I always want to remember that and tell people that my philosophy is that you can be a fabulous trainer and not understand what's under the hood,
Mm-hmm.
much the same way that you can be a fabulous cook and not understand chemistry
Sure.
or physics, right? Or the things that are going on that explain how baking powder is different than baking soda and what you can use if you don't have sugar or something
Yeah.
like that. But similar to the analogy to cooking, the more you know under the hood, I think the better you are prepared at unraveling more complex situations.
Mm.
So when we have a dog that we want to teach to station to stay on a mat, that might be fairly straightforward. When I point to the mat or when the doorbell rings, that's our antecedent. You run to the mat. If you go to the mat, then you earn some kind of um, consequence that is meaningful and valuable to you, whether it's a food treat reinforcer or somebody comes over and pets your head or something like that. But what do you do when you have a dog who doesn't want to go to the mat? or who's afraid to go to the mat, or who has so much history jumping at the door that the mat isn't even in their sort of mental view of a possibility. And I think that when things get just even a little bit more complicated, then knowing how to pick, applesauce as a replacement for eggs in your recipe or
Mm-hmm.
oil in your recipe um, makes you just a better trainer. So I think um, having this framework, this science, to be able to work through what is meaningful to the dog about what they're doing that is not working for us, and then how to change the environment to change that behavior is really augmented by understanding some of the science underneath it.
Mm.
Yeah. And I mean, there is some level of behavior analysis that I don't understand. I always, I joke that I send the article to my mentor, Carl Cheney, who's an 85-year-old notable contributor in behavior analysis and is a co-author of a learning and behavior text, a more advanced text. And I'll get an article and I just cannot make my way through it for all the jargon and the concurrent complex schedules of
Yeah.
and I'll send it to him and I'll say, I want a book report by Tuesday at lunch, and he'll help me understand it. So um, I think that's the top 5% of complexity, that the basic principles cover 90 or 95% of what we need to know
Mm.
to really maximize the quality of life for people and their animals that they're caring for. So I take great joy in the fact that you can be an expert at something and not understand that last 5%. That's just my style.
That's awesome. Yeah. There's always something more to learn for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
in what ways can ABA be applied to the human parts of our work as dog trainers, animal trainers, working with the owners of those animals specifically?
And you're kind of in my head because these are the things that are important to me
Yeah.
as well is, why is the science important and why is it important to people? My hidden agenda is the kids,
Mm,
people's children, which is my origins.
mm,
And I was a very disobedient child in school myself, an anti-authoritarian child. And so thank goodness I had the mom I had who, although she didn't know about behavior analysis, understood that the environment is strongly related to the behavior you see,
mm,
and that the typical school environment, sitting in a desk for long hours, was the providing the contingencies that produced the escape behavior
mm.
that my teachers called misbehaved. So with that mom, I was able to make it through. Um, but I have a lot of compassion for how we treat one another. Part of
Mhm.
that's probably due to me being a 60s kid as well. And so that's really a main goal for me. And it's funny that when I first started working with companion parrots, I was at my very first conference, and there was a notable contributor, one of the sort of the most popular experts in parrot behavior. And a really adoring fan came up to her, and I watched this from a couple of feet away and said to her, "Oh, I'm so thrilled to meet you. My bird," and she was going to launch into a personal story that was important to her. And this expert of the day looked down at her and said, "Do you work for free?" Meaning, don't tell me about your personal issues
Wow.
unless you want to hire me. And I was absolutely, the breath was taken out of my body. And I thought, now there's a place that I can contribute, that the consultants and the trainers should learn to be held to the highest standard of showing what the world looks like um, when you have this knowledge,
Mm,
right? When this knowledge is in your quiver, you should be able to pull out, just the right information and the right compassion for the people you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So I always want to say, on a bad day, I'm raising my voice and my my veins are popping and steam's coming out of my ears. But generally, the value I have is that we can show people how these principles work by applying them to one another.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that look like? It means believing deeply that the problem behavior a client or a colleague is showing is the result of their genetic tendencies and learning history.
Mm-hmm.
Everything they've learned and experienced in their whole life is written, is represented in the behavior they're showing in the current conditions. And believing that they are as flexible as our dogs, that behavior is extraordinarily plastic, unbelievably flexible. So the behavior that you see can be changed. And when you work from our level of analysis, our science, as opposed to neuroscience or genetics or ethology, when you work from behavior analysis, that the way to change those behaviors is by changing the conditions.
Mm.
So you can shape human behavior. You need to know what the client's reinforcers are,
Yeah.
because not everybody has praise as gushing praise as a reinforcer, right? And I'll see people, just pour praise over the client, and the client is behaving just like a dog that doesn't want to eat in front of you. Their shoulders come up and they pull themselves in. So all of the things that we apply to our non-human animals apply to working with one another.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where people say, then you're manipulating, right? Then you're manipulating. How many times have you heard this? And that's when they say, I know what you're doing, right? I know what you're doing to
Yeah.
me. You're trying to reinforce my behavior.
Mm.
And that's when, the teaching really begins to explain to them that all of the behaviors that they're exhibiting are the result of selection by consequences,
Mm-hmm.
another kind of natural selection, that's part of our natural world, that it's simply the way the planet works. You do more of what produces valued outcomes, and you do less of what doesn't. And what would the world look like if you didn't have that capacity to experience good outcomes and have that be your choice to repeat?
Mm.
So it's not that I'm manipulating, it's that I'm more transparent. But
Yeah,
everybody's doing the same thing.
that's
Yeah.
true.
So
Yeah.
that's a big push in my value system, and when I fail, I get up and dust off, think about why I failed, what was the client doing that made me want to grind my teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there are some people I don't work with because we can't find that groove. So I will very happily recommend somebody else who might work with them better. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always open to that. You can't be everything for
Mm-hmm.
all people. I think that's an important value for dog trainers to have.
Mm.
Yeah. So it's a big, deep question you asked.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And I wanted to get your take on it. Um, what I see a lot of is I fear that a lot of people give the dogs more consideration and are more compassionate towards the dogs than they are the dog owner that reached out for help. And I see that conflict and results in, lack of compliance and, inconsistently doing homework and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, I think that you have to look at the human side of that relationship just as much as you do the dogs, because the dog, as much as you want to help the dog, you have to be able to help the human to be able to help
That's
the
right.
dog.
Absolutely. And, when I hear you say that and agree so completely, it makes me think of verbal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
That so much of that behavior we would label not compassionate, eye rolling or pushing harder
Yeah.
or so forth and so on. A lot of that is reinforced, I would guess, by our verbal community.
Mm-hmm.
So that bird consultant who was so snide to this adoring fan. I would imagine, my hypothesis is that the reinforcers are the social, verbal reinforcers of her verbal community. So the people she was standing with, I don't really remember, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were like, God, can you imagine how rude is that? Didn't she
Yeah.
see we were, and so when I hear you say that, it makes me think, what can we do about that?
Mm.
And I think you asking the question is that first step, is using our verbal skills and reinforcers to reinforce the behavior we call compassionate,
Mm-hmm.
patient, understanding, and to not reinforce that snide sort of social hierarchy, kinds of things, and always remembering that we didn't always have this information either.
Right.
I had a student in the LLA class, might have been your class. Um, she said to me when I said about being compassionate to humans and our clients, I used to use the phrase, they just don't have our information. They don't have our information.
Mm.
And our job then is to give it to them. Um, and she corrected me and said, it's not that they don't have good information. I mean, per se, it's that it's not they have bad information, it's that they had different information.
Mm.
So she felt that the respectful stance was augmented by seeing people who think differently, not as thinking worse or badly, but by seeing them as holding different information.
Mm-hmm.
And our job was to just try and close that gap. And I pushed back on it for a long time. She was great. She was really patient. And I said, no, it's really worse information. Slamming a dog's head in a door to teach it not to door dash is bad information. And she held firm. And then it's sort of like things do, over the couple of years, it kind of grew brighter. And now I say different information, because when we see those people, they are as passionate,
Right.
right? I mean, I guess to the extreme, I would say Caesar Milan does not think he's not compassionate,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So it's a different perspective, and it's one that we want to impact,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we just teach harder. Yeah.
Exactly. Awesome. Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about your course for professionals, and also let us know when the next session is starting.
Yeah, it started out as a parrot class in 2001 because I was trying to influence this old school punishment-oriented culture of companion parrot people. And it was free because I was writing the lectures for the first time and putting the slides together for the first time. And I taught it for free for 5 years to make sure that I had something worth purchasing and building that confidence. And then the charge was a $50 donation to a worthy organization of my choice. And the money went directly to the organization. So for years, we were, as a community, doing this wonderful donation thing for the class. And then in 2007, I decided that I wanted to teach professionals. And so I retooled the slides a bit to match professionals' needs and questions, and retooled the lectures a little bit. Um, and so that's the class that you took. That's the current class today, LLA. It's taught twice a year now, and that's in January, and then either the end of July start date or beginning of August. The dates shift depending on my travel schedule for 8 weeks. The next one is January 5th. There is still room.
Ooh.
And the way we run it is very unique. We have 10 or up to 15 TAs, teacher assistants or co-instructors, who take your homework and dialogue one-to-one with each student to make the homework question, which is itself very simple and short, to make it broader and deeper through that conversation that we call the query system. So if anybody's interested, there is a What People Say section on my website. and you can get a good feel for who's taken it and their praise. Um, and yeah, what do you think? Anything else to say? It's so great that you took it. Am I leaving anything
Yes.
important out?
Oh, it's been a few years since I took it, but yeah, I mean, it was by far one of the most thorough courses I've been through, probably even including like college courses. So it definitely prepared me for the college course very easily.
Oh, good. That's good to
Um,
hear.
and like I said, it's obviously a science.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that I think that every animal trainer out there should take, just to see why it is that the things that they do actually change behavior and the long-term impact. And then also, you don't just talk about the impact of consequences and antecedents and all that, but also the ethics of it, and the ability for the animal to have a say in the training process was really eye-opening for me as well.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I just wrote a new article. I refreshed the concept of the procedural hierarchy
Oh, nice.
and the least intrusive, effective alternative. I'll send that to you when we're
Yes.
done.
Yes.
And you're welcome to pass it on
I
or
definitely will
post it.
share it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good,
Absolutely.
good.
Awesome. What is one thing you could, if there was one thing you could change or improve about the dog training industry, what would it be?
Yeah. Well, I'm so admiring of the positive reinforcement based trainers who are really changing the world for dogs and children and the people they work with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very happy with that and just want to contribute to that, motoring along.
Yeah.
I guess, I definitely have my sights on the people with different information. Um, as I mentioned, it kind of, it's close to my heart because it's a email I just got a couple of days ago. But there are still people that are slamming doors on dogs' heads, and there are still people who are teaching clients to kick their dog to get them to not jump at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those behaviors are so easy to change when you understand the science and have that training experience.
Right.
So many of the, I'd say 90% again, I'm just pulling a number, but the majority of problems people ask for help with are things we easily can help them learn to change. And so to continue to see this punishment orientation is really heartbreaking
Mm-hmm.
when we have other tools.
Right.
And, of all the different ways to be positive reinforcement oriented or least intrusive oriented, I'm not one of these people who say positive reinforcement only. You
Right.
know,
Right.
I live what I would say is a very realistic, I'm a realist optimist, not just an optimist.
Mm.
A very realistic world. And I can see, I'm aware of, I know of cases where escalating up that procedural hierarchy to use, um, the deliberate presentation of an aversive stimulus, like a negative reinforcement or punishment, may be needed. So they're there if we need them. But none of these examples that you see on TV or that people come to us with are even close to needing to go beyond,
Right.
you know, differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior or something like
Right.
that, reinforcing an alternative
Yeah.
to reduce the problem behavior. And so there are days where I'm just so, I guess, profoundly surprised that that's still going on,
Mm.
that I could receive a video that was on Instagram that shows the behavior of slamming a door on a dog's head. Where has that person been living while we've been building this great evidence base of how shaping and differential reinforcement and antecedent arrangement work?
Right.
So I guess that's what, one thing that I would change. I wouldn't change much in our community
Yeah.
because I think we're just soaking it up like sponges, and we're refining things, which is great fun for me to see. That procedures I've used my whole career are being refined and changed in small ways that make them even sharper tools. I never expected that. So that's really cool. But I think, that periphery of different styles of training that are punishment oriented or force and coercion oriented just simply needs to change. And we do that with compassion and information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Keeping that conversation going as difficult as it is.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. I know that was it's always a tough question to end on, but I like asking it to see what others are thinking.
It's a good one.
All right. So thank you so much for joining me today. If people want to learn more about you or your program, where can they go?
Well, two places nowadays. One is my website, behaviorworks.org. So it's not .com. That would take you somewhere else, behaviorworks.org. And anything on that website is available for you to download and repurpose. If you edit anything, check in with me so I can be sure that it still fits the vision of whatever it is you're editing. But there's lots of articles, and there's great poster graphics you can download and put on t-shirts, whatever. So anything on that website is there for you. I've also put up drafts of my veterinary textbook chapters. There's 5 of them up there, and I just put the word draft on it so I don't get into too much trouble with publishers, I hope. So everything is there and everything is yours. Just take it and use it well. And then the other place I'd recommend is my Facebook page. Trying to avoid the politics of Facebook, because there are times where I think I'd be a better contributor to our political climate if I closed down that page, but I haven't yet. And that's BehaviorWorks, Facebook.com/BehaviorWorks. And there, probably twice a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, I put up a great video of training that someone has shared with me. And either they describe in a paragraph the points they want people to focus on, or I explain it from a science point of view. So go to Facebook BehaviorWorks, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And also, if you've got a great video that you think would be, a good illustration of a particular principle or a technique or something joyful, please feel free to email me with that, and we can get it up on the Facebook page. But also, your listeners are welcome to email me to talk about, anything that they think I can help them with.
Oh, wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Good interviewing. You can tell by how much I talk. That's your measure of how well you interviewed. Good job, because I talked a lot. Thanks so much.
Thank you again for listening to the Modern Dog Trainer podcast. If you're listening to this podcast in December of 2020, I have good news. The Modern Dog Trainer Academy is now enrolling. This is a 12-week program with live coaching. This program will guide you through the best practices for a modern-day dog business that suits your ideal lifestyle, income goals, and impact level. This is ideal for professional dog trainers that are making $1,000 or more from your dog training business currently, but want to make 6 figures. If you're interested in joining us, go to moderndogbusiness.com/academy. We'd love to have you.